It took me years of sleepless nights, money-sucking rehabs, and a close-to-arms experience with a contractor before I realized how to find the best contractors for my rehab projects. Here we are again, the last time I'm gonna get sucked into hiring the wrong type of contractor. I don't even have a name for this kind of crappy contractor. Maybe I should call it the criminal. But after a barrage of change orders and general shoddy work, we finally had to let this guy go and do the work ourselves. Hey man, I'm sorry about this, but we've just taken on too many change orders for this job and we're gonna have to let you go and do it ourselves.
We're gonna find a way to settle on the pay? Man, you. This is I'm gonna come up to that office.
Well, after that, I did a little Googling on this guy and found quite the criminal history. For safety concerns, I actually sent the office staff home until I could get this thing resolved. Not a situation you want to find yourself in. However, this is not the first time I've dealt with a contractor who's made a project less than optimal. In fact, I've identified 10 different types of contractors who don't fit the mold for an investor-grade rehabber. Now, before you go getting all bent out of shape about these different types of contractors, you got to understand one of the bigger things at play is that contractors all tend to get grouped up into the same class, which is contractors for construction. But you got to realize there's multiple different types of construction. There's high-end renovations, there's new builds, there's commercial work. Here at La Raza, we're talking specifically about investor-grade rehabs. So here are the 9 different types of contractors we've gone through, starting with this guy. When I first started out as an investor, I had just come from a corporate background, so I was looking for the polished professional type. I imagine it just like those shows on HGTV. The guy shows up in his collared shirt with his clipboard and starts taking all the notes. Hey man, I'm just trying to flip this house, seeing what you... He has all the answers with my vision in mind. He spits out a price on the spot. I agree. Then a couple months later, I'm just rolling in the profits. Well, these guys will certainly get it done. However, they are generally built for different types of construction than you're doing. Well, I hope you got a great price on the front end, like house price, free. I call that guy the professional. Well, I knew that wasn't gonna work for me because the deals in this game are always tight. Besides, even if you get a rehab bid that fits your budget, wait for that first change order. So I had to go back to the drawing board and my roots. I grew up in a blue-collar community, so I started searching for the kind of guys who knew how to build and did it all themselves. You know the type. He basically wears a worn-out leather tool belt to the dinner table, a real Bob Vila. This worked out great. I got a phenomenal price, at least in comparison to Mr. Wall Street from before. So I accepted the bid, thinking I finally had it all figured out. Then 5 years later, that project was finally complete. I'm joking. I mean, kinda. Fortunately, everything worked out well enough, and by the time he was done, it was time for the next project. However, this new project wasn't quite as nice as the last one, which was more of a cosmetic renovation. This one was more like what you actually deal with as an investor out there, not what they show you on HGTV. And this is where the problem began. It didn't take long for the Craftsman to become the Ghost. These guys want to build pretty things on clean job sites. Also, they strive for perfection. Unfortunately, the types of properties we get our hands on don't really fit this bill. And quality craftsmanship is really continuity between the projects and finding the line of good enough. Well, that kind of mentality doesn't really keep these guys happy for that long. And if you didn't catch it, I call that one the Craftsman. Well, at that point, I had had enough of dealing with ghosts. I wanted to find someone who wasn't going to care about the crappy houses I was buying and could give me a price that worked out for my kind of deals. My goal here was price above all else. And I found those kind of guys. In fact, I found way too many of them. Paint this whole building for $800? $1 a square foot for floors, material included? Well, sign me up, baby. Well, sign me up, baby. Well, sign me up, baby. The thing is, my job sites always smelled a little bit like a scene from Breaking Bad. And who's that random guy on my job site? Where'd you go for the last 10 days? Now that I think of it, how did you get those floors for so cheap? Who broke into my tool trailer? No. Well, this one has gotten me multiple times. The low price of a renovation just keeps dragging me in. Maybe that's my drug. Ha! Maybe that's my drug. Seriously, I mean, like, cheap renovations are the drug. Well, my final intervention came when I got a house broken into and all my materials and tools cleaned out. And I guess I finally realized that there's just really no escaping the true price of construction. It always seems like if you save on one thing, you end up paying for it in another way. Anyway, that one I call the crackhead. Well, after this revelation, I started going to some local investor meetups where I met a guy who really seemed to have it all together. He was a contractor who had a large crew and took on a high volume of projects. The high volume allowed him to get better pricing due to efficiencies. It made perfect sense, like the Costco of contractors. Smaller profits, higher volume. Well, that's my type of guy. You're hired. There's one small problem. Growing that fast requires intense and never-ending management. More importantly, it requires growing a pool of crew members that are high level and somewhat self-managing. Well, I can tell you, that's dang near impossible. Well, I know, because that contractor was me. After years of trying to grow an internal crew large enough to handle the volume of projects that I was doing, I realized that that's not the way. At least it's not for me. At that point, I decided to heavily downsize my business and really only do internal projects or a small handful of customer jobs with customers whose values really aligned with mine. And with all the free time I gained, I decided to make a YouTube channel about all the idiotic mistakes I've made over the last decade. Hey, you're welcome. P.S. I call that one the grower, but the grower is actually the shower. Over-promising, under-delivering, you get it. During the process of building a fierce internal team, I ran through a few different types of guys that just weren't gonna work out for me. The first one I called a go-getter. Well, he's down for whatever. He's there to please. The only problem is he's so scared of making a mistake that he'll call you to make sure he was raking the leaves right. Well, dang it, I don't have time to be on the phone all day. And so I moved on to the next one. The go-getter is a total bandwidth thief. And I decided that if I was gonna have to put that sort of time into somebody, I might as well find somebody with the right mentality, the right attitude, with the longer runway, maybe somebody new to the industry, and I could teach them the trades. The problem is twofold. One, I totally underestimated the length of time it takes to actually learn the trades. And the problem is that it would always be on my dime when they were learning. Which leads me to the next thing. Number two, when they finally did learn how to become beasts and problem solve, then they would start looking at jobs in those other types of construction that we talked about earlier. So I would never actually reap the full rewards of my investment. Never is a pretty strong word. I still work with some great guys. Anyway, I call that one the rookie. Naturally, next, I decided to hire some guys with some actual experience under their belt. But it turns out that these guys actually had some other things on their mind than churning out rehab projects. See, they taught me all kinds of lessons, like why I needed 3 guys to do what I always thought was a one-man job. And thankfully, they taught me the correct form when I'm leaning on a shovel to watch other guys work. Well, thanks, guys. I call that one the Union Steward. Well, fortunately, I think I finally have actually put my finger on the right kind of guys to hire for our internal crew, but that's for another day. So today, it's back to the story and back to where we began, with the guy coming up to my office with clenched fists looking for a fight. Well, I call that one the Dirty Contractor, and I did a whole video about the 10 different types of dirty contractors, so check it out. The encounter with this particular dirty contractor left me cold and callous. There always seemed to be issues between the scope of work we discussed and what actually got done, and the barrage of change orders and all the BS. I started looking at myself thinking, man, I must be doing something wrong. But after he showed up to my office that day, I decided I would never let it happen again. I would make the most detailed scopes of work the world has ever seen. I would hire people, I would use those scopes of work to set detailed expectations, and then I would hold them accountable. If they didn't do what I asked them to do, what we had agreed upon, I would come down like a ton of bricks. Nobody would take advantage of me again. And this went on for quite some time. And man, I was getting results. I was getting projects completed on time, customers were happy, and my portfolio was growing. But I sure wasn't making any friends. Then I ran into a guy that I used to work with back in my grower days. He had started his own contracting business, and most of his crew was his family. And he was out looking for work. So I decided, heck, I'll give you a shot. And I followed the same old routine. I set a very clear expectation, and I was ready to lay down the hammer. But this guy was different. He worked his butt off. His whole crew worked their butts off. And I didn't have to chase him around to meet my expectations. He exceeded expectations on his own. He worked for more than just a paycheck. He actually wanted to deliver a great project. See, he understood the bigger picture. He understood that what a great product meant was a project that made the investor money. He believed that if I made profit, he would make profit, that we could both be successful in this game together. This guy helped me understand what was really important when I was out searching for contractors. And moving forward, I would only hire contractors who understood these principles. 1, understanding business. If the investor makes money, everybody makes money. In the real estate game, quality means consistency, not necessarily craftsmanship. 2, big picture focused. Investor grade rehabs may have some downsides, but the huge upside is that if the investor is making money, the work can be never ending. 3, skills. They're not newbies. They know the trades and they have experience working shoulder to shoulders with other contractors on a job site. 4, they're leaders. They have a crew that is bought in. They care deeply about their crew. They know how to manage that crew effectively. And 5, their crew is made up of their family or their closest friends. This helps reinforce the strength of their leadership. Now, this guy helped me understand the characteristics of a great rehab contractor, but he shed light on an even greater topic for me, and that's the true blue-collar spirit. He embodied it to a T. I mean, he brought his family over here, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make them succeed. Now, his approach to business helped me realize that I could actually embody this myself. And instead of beating my head against the wall, I could focus on building relationships with great contractors like him. And on top of all that, I'd get the side benefits of more projects and more profits. Good luck out there, investors.